Welcome back. It's Monday, so we're going to get started today with session 11, which is called Using Information to Better Understand Fantasy Stories. So it's going to be a pretty quick mini lesson, and then I'm going to let you guys get to work. So just make sure you are giving me your full attention for the next couple of minutes, and I would greatly appreciate that. Okay, let's get started. So our teaching point today is that writers of fantasy refer to nonfiction text in order to develop the worlds of their stories. So what that means is that as an author is creating these fantasy worlds, there are some things that they're going to have to go and research and look up in order to do it correctly. So yes, we know that fantasy is some type of made-up world, for sure, okay? They can't go and look up dragons or things like that because that's not real. So, but there are some little details here and there that they want to make sure that they know enough information about to make sure they're doing it right, okay? So I have an example for you from the Paper Bag Princess. If you guys remember this one, on the very first page, I'm going to show you. So on the very first page, do you guys remember this one? It's where we're just meeting our characters. Robert Munsch, the author of The Paper Bag Princess, did some research in order to write this small picture book. And he had to research medieval castles and what they looked like in order to correctly portray Elizabeth and Ronald on this first page. So if we look, we see, can you guys see that? We see the windows. So you can see the windows in the background. You can see the chair that kind of like the throne that they would sit on, and just the overall walls, what they're made out of. Those are some things that he would have had to go to a nonfiction text or the internet and do some research. He doesn't want to portray this castle as incorrect. He had to make sure that he showed it correctly in order for the reader to really understand and really feel like we are there with our characters. So I would imagine that Robert Munsch would have to do some research on medieval castles, what they looked like, what their structure was made out of, and what are some different decorating things that were in medieval castles. Another thing that he would probably have to research would be clothing of people in medieval times. So if we look, we see Elizabeth. Elizabeth is wearing this gown, this dress, and he can't just have her in anything, right? He has her set in some type of medieval land. So he has to have her wearing something that would make sense, right? She's not going to be wearing like a Target, pair of jeans and a t-shirt because that didn't exist during her time period. And he knows in his mind, he's making up this world in medieval times. So he wants to make sure that there are some things that he gets right in his story, okay? In my book that I'm reading, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, a lot of it is made up. It's a fantasy book, but there are some things that our author would have had to research and really learn more about. And that would be things like World War II, when were the bombs dropped and where, and when were bombs dropped. Our author would have to learn a lot about Florida and just like the landscape of Florida and what it was like in Florida, because if you remember at the beginning, that's where Jacob was, and it had to seem real. It had to make us, the author had to make us feel like he knew what he was talking about, okay? So today for your work time, you're just going to list out some things that you think the author of your book would have had to research before writing. What are some things that they would have to learn and gain knowledge about before they created this fantasy story for you as the reader? So if I was doing the Paper Bag Princess, I would make sure that I jot down that the author would have had to research medieval castles. Oops, I spelled that wrong. There we go. Oh, M-E, not M-I. So our author would have had to research medieval castles in order to make sure that he portrayed that correctly. They would have also had to research medieval dress clothing. Okay. So we decided that Robert Munsch would have to make sure that he was very knowledgeable about that in order to properly portray his characters in the story. If I was doing Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children today, a few things that I could put, and you guys can take some of my ideas if you want, but you have to add some of your own. So a few things that I would put are World War II, when and where bombs were dropped by the Germans. And then I also said the Florida landscape. There's a lot more, so I'm not going to give away all of my thinking, but here's what I want you guys to do, and you can add more bullets if needed. These are the books that you guys are reading are very long, they're very in-depth. You're almost to the end of the book by now, so you should be able to come up with enough to fill this, okay? I already put some bullets in for you. You should be able to come up with enough here, okay? The author who wrote Percy Jackson would probably have to research a lot about all of the different myths and mythology and those characters. So that's an idea for you guys. If you were the author of Harry Potter, you again would have to research castles because of Hogwarts, obviously. England, a lot about England, their language, how they spoke, things like that. I know they speak English, but like they have an accent and they have certain, words and things that they use that are different than us who speak English. So I've given you guys a few ideas. So I want you just to jot down some things that you think that your author would have had to go and research before they wrote their novel and before they created this fantasy world for us. For your reflection today, you guys are going to be picking one of these things that you are most interested in as the reader. So for your work time, you're really thinking about the author. What did the author have to go and research? For your reflection today, you can think about yourself as the reader and be thinking, what am I as the reader most interested in learning more about? And at the end, when I learn more about this, it's going to help me understand the story more. So you can just jot down on this line here, what is something that you wrote up here that you are interested in learning more about and gaining more knowledge about, okay? At the end of the day, it's going to help you understand your story better. So just to debrief, here's your work time today. What are some things the author of the book would have had to research before writing? I'm expecting most of these bullets to be filled up, if not more. Your reflection is, pick one of those things that you are most interested in as the reader, and you can just jot that down for me on that line. Okay, let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing the different types of things that you guys come up with as you have read these novels. There's going to be a lot of things in there that the author is going to seem really knowledgeable that they had to go and learn more about. So that's what you're jotting down for me today, and I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. Good luck, get to work, and I will see you tomorrow.